Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the Human Element Series. This is episode 312. I'm Chris Hednegi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since 2009, if you can believe that. As always, our sponsor is our company, Social Engineer. So if you're looking for services, training, or other items related to social engineering for your organization, you can go check out social-engineer.com. We have a host of new services, especially since we have Dr. Abby on board. You can go check out what we're doing there and reach out to us. And if you're interested in the topic of social engineering, I encourage you to visit our Slack channel. I think we have about almost 1,800 or more people in there every day talking about different topics around social engineering. It's a family-friendly and legal place to go. So if you want to discuss these items that way, then you can find the link in the show notes or just hit me up on LinkedIn. And I'd be more than happy to give you the most current link to join that Slack channel. And I want to invite everyone to take a minute to go check out innocentlivesfoundation.org. It's a nonprofit that we've been running for about 8 years. Our mission is to help law enforcement geolocate people who traffic children and create child abuse material. And we're up to over 570 cases now. So as a nonprofit, we can use your help. You can support us by donating your time or your money if you want to visit innocentlivesfoundation.org and find out how you can help us out. And last but not least, if you like the music on the show, it's none other than Clutch. So go to clutchmerch.com and show them some love. As we all know, Neil helped me to start the Innocent Lives Foundation 8 years ago. So we're big fans. And if you like this episode, give us a thumbs up or a like and keep your ideas coming in for guests and themes. And let's get to our guest for today. It's none other than Doug Thorpe. He's an experienced leadership coach, business advisor, and speaker. He focuses on helping small to mid-sized business owners and executives develop their leadership capabilities. He's got decades of experience in banking, finance, and business management. He's transitioned to coaching and advisory services to help others navigate their professional growth journey. Doug, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today.
Absolutely, Chris. Happy to be here, and shout out and thank you for being on my show, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. It's been a well-received episode, so thanks for your contribution there.
I appreciate it. And I enjoyed being on your show. Actually, it's kind of what drove us to want to do this episode for some of the things we talked about. Before we get to that, I want to just know, we always ask this question, how did you get to where you are today? What is your journey to where you're sitting right now? How did that look like?
Well, I'll keep it really short. It was a fairly random and widely varied experience. Hit the high points. I came out of college, commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Army. I spent some time on active duty doing that. Decided that Army life wasn't for me long term. Hit the market. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I had a college friend who was working at a very well-run regional bank. They invited me to come in for an interview, and 20 years later, I took an early retirement from banking, and I did have progressively bigger leadership roles in that organization, and we can talk about some of that as we get into it. But I did what all good bankers do. I turned into a consultant when I left the bank and did that for a number of years, and that's a big part of the story that I tell about my coaching and advising now. What I discovered as a consultant, a lot of my clients really weren't worried about the technical project we were running or implementing. They were more worried about some stuff they had going on in their head trash. You know, they had things they wanted to get out, have somebody to talk to. And apparently I showed up as a trusting confidant and, I would get the finger wag, hey, come in here, shut the door. I got something I want to talk about. It was nothing to do with the project we were doing, but it intrigued me. And fast forward a number of years, I got tired of the consulting and just said, you know what? I think this coaching thing is a much better answer. And I've been doing that now for almost 15 years.
That's amazing. I always love these kind of stories because it's like you didn't wake up one day and go, I'm going to become a leadership coach. It's like your path just took you there. So how did you develop a leadership framework that allowed you then to help others, like you said in your bio, like achieve their goals?
Well, what I point to is I have had a passion for leadership my whole life. There's a joke in my family when certain things happen, they revert back to, I was a captain of the crossing guard at my elementary school when I was in 5th grade. And people may not even know what that is, but back in my day, we put kids in traffic with stop signs to stop the cars and get other kids to cross the crosswalks.
Yeah.
That's unheard of now. Nobody would even think about it.
Now it's adults doing it, right? with high vis vests and everything.
It was an organization of student volunteers, and it was faculty supervised. I want to be clear about that. But nonetheless, I saw that as a youngster, second grade, third grade. I watched those guys. I idolized those guys. I thought, wow, this is so cool. And I just aspired to become the captain of the whole thing, and I did. And but it wasn't an ego trippy kind of thing. It was just I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what it was, but it was a hunger to serve. I thought that was, what it really meant. And as I've gone back on that really was the driver. And as I look back, that has kind of been my story along, whether it was in high school or college or even in the military. There were opportunities that came up that weren't specific to the position or the role I was in, but maybe it was a volunteer effort or something extracurricular that needed to be done. And I was always the guy volunteering, raising my hand. And I'd go to the first meeting, and next thing you know, they'd say, well, would you consider leading this for us? And it's like, okay, I can do that. I'm happy to. And it's come natural to me, but I've also, in parallel with all that, I've been a voracious reader and student of leadership theory. I was introduced to management theory in college, going all the way back to the so-called theory X and theory Y of management. And again, probably a lot of people don't even know what that is anymore, but it's early 1900s stuff, studies that were done, papers that were written. And it fascinated me to realize there were different ways to think about leading teams and building businesses. And I just I had an appetite for following that and always monitoring that. And quite honestly, as I obtained my opportunities for promotion and things, I sometimes used my new situation as a little bit of a laboratory. I said, I've never done this before. Let me see if this will work. And I would try it out, and, sometimes it did and sometimes it didn't. But it was a great journey and a lot of fun. And it's enabled me to pack a whole lot into the toolkit that I bring when I work with clients.
You said something I had to write down because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget it. You said that you've always had a hunger to serve. How important is having that mindset in becoming a leader?
Well, it is exactly square in the middle of what is popularly now considered servant leadership. And basically what I say, I was doing it before that became a thing. And, the theory of servant leadership means it's really not looking at your team and saying, how can you guys serve me? But it's flipping the script and say, how can I serve you for our collective greater good that we're trying to achieve? We say we've got a business that's going to do X. Okay. But, what do we think the best way to do that is? And now let me figure out how I can help you do your best work so that we can achieve that greater good.
Mm-hmm. That's really fascinating to me because I've had other folks on the show like you, and it's always fascinating to how that mindset seems to have changed. That a lot of leaders now talk about this, about how important it is to have the empathy mindset, the giving mindset, the serving mindset, and that makes you actually a stronger leader. And the more I think about people that I've considered some of my best mentors, they've had that same attitude, right? They weren't the bullies that kind of came in and just said, "Yeah, you're going to do this." It was they really wanted to help. So you said something else when we were talking before about learning how to respond and not to react. Can you tell me more about what that means to you and how you came up with like that kind of idea?
Yeah, well, first let's talk about the phrase itself. And the challenge is learn how to, as you quoted it, learn how to respond rather than react. When a person takes on a role of responsibility as a manager or a leader, things are going to happen. You can have your best laid plans, best ideas of what you want to do, but life is going to get in the way. And as General Eisenhower famously said, your plans go out the window when the first shot is fired. or I think it was it Tyson that said your plans go out of the way when you get punched in the face? And that's a very fair statement of reality. But the issue is this: people in roles of responsibility, if they react to the moment like, oh my God, what are we going to do? You know, that kind of thing. It is inevitably an emotionally packed moment, and the emotion derails everything that you're really trying to do. It either compounds it, pours gasoline on the small fire that just flared up, or if you can better respond, what you can do, you can steer the event into the channel of whatever the initiative is that you're working on. And one of the things that when I work with leaders, where I've come to really believe the superpower is in being able to respond rather than react, is to build and constantly maintain your own foundation of belief in what you want to be as a leader, how you want to serve your organization. And you have to have your own sense of vision and purpose for the work you're doing. You have to be able to articulate your direction, your pathway. Therefore, if you can do that, when these flash fires come up and you can respond better in the moment because you can filter everything through that lens of, wait a minute, where did we say we're going? How does this thing impact us one way or the other? Is it going to propel us forward? Is it going to help us? Is it a happy accident that this thing just happened? Or is this going to be a deterrent or a detriment to what we're doing? And we can say, no, we're not going to go there. We're not going to do that thing. And if you don't have that foundation of belief in where you are as a leader and what you want to do, you have no basis from which to respond. You're going to be prone to react.
This is fascinating for me. So I want to dig a little deeper on this. How do you get to the point where you are able to control the emotional response when things that are really emotional, like losing a big client or having somebody really important quit or something like that happen? How do you control the emotional response? Well,
I like that question, and I think it is an important one. In fact, I had a guest on my show recently. We had a pretty deep dive discussion about this, that it's not a matter of just eliminating the emotion and becoming some kind of emotionless robot. That's not it at all. We are human beings. We do have our own emotions and experiences and sensitivities about what we're doing, even into the psychological realm of reaction to things. But the challenge is, as a leader, you need to be able to compartmentalize. And what I encourage people to think about is there is inevitably a trigger point when stuff starts bubbling up and you just can't take it anymore, and you're prone to that emotional discharge in the moment. It's very, very important for a leader to have the self-awareness to know where that tripwire may be and make a conscious decision. Some call it self-regulating, to say, whoa, I feel this building. I'm going to call it, I want to table this discussion. We'll do it another day. Or know in your own mind, my emotion is getting ready to take over. I need to carve that out and park it. I don't want to ignore it. I don't want to diminish it, but I do want to separate it and park it for a moment and get on with what we need to be doing. And then, as my guest the other day described, what we need to do is, as leaders, we need to find the time to go back and revisit that emotion. Don't let it continue building up. I had a mentor many, many years ago that challenged me on this. I'll be honest, as a younger man in my leadership journey, I had my own, I was guilty of some anger management issues. And it's a long story of where that came from, but I at least was seeking help to get past that. I knew it was not going to be good for my long-term career. And I had a mentor working with me at that time. And he said, Doug, all that emotion and anger is kind of like battery acid. stuff that's in your car battery. If you let it overflow, you're going to corrode and corrupt and damage a lot of stuff around you. You have to be able to work through and deal with those emotions as they happen and process them accordingly. Don't store them up, because something's going to trigger you, and boom, somebody gets an eruption that they didn't deserve because you got a bunch of other stuff packed in and built up. So it was great advice. It made a lot of sense to me at the time, and it became a good word picture for what I was experiencing. So I've done a whole lot over the years, I've done a whole lot of work to help regulate that. And now my response to those moments when I feel that emotion bubbling, I have a control mechanism. I know what I can do with it. I know I don't need to, blow up at my wife and kids or my workmates. I can pack that temporarily in a safe place, and then I'll carve out time and I'll go deal with it on my own.
That must have taken a lot of work and effort to become that self-aware, because you don't see that.
No, it was a long journey. I talk about in my own life arc. There's 1995 was my year of this discovery. This was a major turning point for me. So I was already in my 40s and I was still dealing with this stuff, and it was disruptive.
Yeah.
And I just knew I didn't want to do that anymore and didn't want to have that as part of my life. So I joined a group. I found this mentor, and we did some group things for over a year. It was almost a year and a half. And I mean, I'm talking regular weekly stuff. This was not just once a month. This was really dedicated effort to get through it and work around it.
Well, I think also, just to kind of give you some credit for all of this, it's hard enough to become self-aware, but then to also openly talk about it and use it as a learning lesson. That's kind of amazing. That's a wonderful leadership quality right there. So thank you for being able to do that.
Absolutely.
What else would you say is important to know if people are listening to this and they're like, okay, I just learned some new things and I want to improve myself. I want to become a better leader. Is there another tip or two that you could share with us?
Yeah, there's a word picture I use to explain something to people. I believe the game of leadership, and I don't mean any disrespect when I call it a game, but if you just know it's a commitment of time, energy, and effort to do the right thing. If you think of the game of leadership a little bit like the game of golf, we just celebrated the Masters tournament, big historic event in the world of golf. But in the game of golf, you've got 14 clubs you can put in your bag, and 14 is the max count by regulation. And you can use different things, but, there's usually a spectrum of clubs, and each club has a different purpose. It's designed differently. It's weighted differently. The shaft is a little bit longer or shorter, depending. And every one of those clubs has a purpose. And good golfers can learn how to reliably hit each one of those clubs. But great golfers can take a single club and hit it multiple ways to achieve the outcome they want for the situation they're facing on the golf course. So, and we saw some great recovery shots out on the golf course at the Masters for anybody that watched it. People would miss their tee shot. It would go off in the woods, and then there the ball was. The only line you had was a little narrow opening between two trees. And, it for most of us mortals, it would be an impossible trick shot to pull off. But for these pros, they would thread that needle with their next shot, and it would just be perfect. It would be a great outcome, a great recovery. Well, the leadership toolkit I'm talking about is similar to the golf bag. You have to have multiple abilities, strengths, beliefs, principles that you want to bring to the table, and they need to be custom designed for how you're wired emotionally, whether it's a function of the experiences you've had and the kind of the collective awareness that you have built over time, or sometimes it's aspirational. Sometimes you've got a pretty good array of capability as a leader, but there's one thing missing, or there's some other element that you haven't quite figured out, haven't quite mastered it. And you can pick that just like a golfer would say, I'm going to get a 62-degree lob wedge in my bag. Well, that's a tricky club to learn how to use. And I'm sorry, I'm talking technical golf stuff here, but it's a much shorter club. The face it almost looks like a shovel rather than a blade, but, and it's a tricky one to learn how to use, but a lot of people, get it because it does some great things with the effect of the shot. But it's like if you've never had a 62-degree gap wedge in your bag, you want to add one. Well, that's a new skill, new tool. You got to do a lot of practice. You got to do a lot of development to learn how to use it well. Same thing is true with your leadership framework. And from a practical standpoint, what I invite people to do when I'm working with them is begin building a leadership framework. Tell me about the attributes that resonate with you. And what ends up happening, is people start with things like, well, I know I need to be a good communicator. I want to be trustworthy. I want to be accountable. I want to be reliable. I want to be transparent, empathetic. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And that's great. But the point is, it's like going out and buying a custom suit or something. It needs to be custom fit to who you are and what you are. It cannot be anything fake. I mean, I do a lot of work with engineers, for instance, and the majority of all engineers will never be known as charismatic leaders. They're just not going to pull off the personality to stand in front of a crowd, draw them in with some kind of other gymnastics or demonstrative personality. It's just not their nature to do that. And that's okay. That's just fine. But the point is, you need to figure it out for yourself what does fit. I've encouraged people when they're doing this exercise to build the framework, think about historic figures or popular figures, sports figures, politicians, although everybody kind of chokes when we say politician, but there are people that are known for certain skills and abilities, whether you liked them or not and voted for them. It's undeniable they've got it. And, if that's a skill that resonates with you and you want to put it in your toolkit, you need to add that to the list.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think that's an important lesson because it is easy to say, oh, I want to be just like so-and-so, but that custom fit, like you said, I think that's a really important piece that a lot of people might miss in developing that framework. So you said something about about how great leaders will work on building other leaders. Now, that seems like an opposite thought to a lot of people today. Like if I'm working with you and I'm training you to take my job, then maybe the boss doesn't need me anymore. So what is that? What do you mean by that statement? Like what is the goal there and how do we do that effectively without making ourselves not needed?
Yeah, the statement I've come up with, and I use this in a lot of my teaching and writing, is good leaders make things happen. Great leaders build other leaders.
Mm-hmm.
That's the phrase we're talking about here. And I do agree with you. Some people have that mindset. Well, why would I pour all of what I know into somebody else? Because, they could take my job and the company wouldn't need me anymore. I argue that that's unfortunately very narrow-minded view of it. And part way of how I help some people, particularly when I get a chance to work with older executives that have already been at the game 20, 30 years. Maybe they only have 5 years on their runway, and then they know they're going to retire or exit. Maybe it's a little longer. But sometimes if it's a bigger corporate environment and they say, well, I don't know why the company paid for me, I don't know what I can do. What I will challenge them with is, well, fine, let's talk about your legacy. What do you want people to say, think, and do about you when you are gone? And I've brought people to tears over that question. Mm-hmm. And it is a profound one if you think about it. And maybe for some of our younger listeners, they can't even fathom what that looks like. But I can promise you when that clock turns age 40, you're going to start thinking about stuff like that if you haven't already.
Yeah.
And it's your opportunity to think about, well, I should pour everything I know into the next generation of people coming up the chain, because that's the way I spread my legacy. And, I always joke when we talk about this legacy question, I tell people, your company's probably not going to put your name on a building somewhere. No, we're not talking about that kind of legacy. But if you've got a team or an audience that you're working with, you've got maybe 6, 8, 10 direct reports, and they have multiples of numbers. And maybe there's even a downline from there to where the organization is maybe 200 or 300 or bigger. You've got a great opportunity to put your fingerprint on that and influence those upcoming leaders to be better at what they're doing.
Yeah. I always felt that if you help find your replacement, that just means you move up, not out. Right. So I like the way you defined it. It's really, really nice. Doug, if people want to find out more about you or the services you offer or things like that, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best thing to do for the coaching and the executive leadership development work is my personal branded site at dougthorpe.com, THORPE.com. I do have, for my business advisory work, it's under a different brand. It's actually under the name of my firm, Headway Exec. And that's headwayexec.com. So there are 2 websites out there. One is for the business advisory work, more specific, and the other is for the more one-on-one or small group executive leadership development.
And for all those listening, we'll have all in the show notes, the links to Doug's LinkedIn, the podcast that he's on, both of those websites. We'll have all those links there in the show notes. There's 2 questions I always ask at the end of a podcast that I've been doing since 2009. Now, the first is, I don't know about you, and you've mentioned it already, but for me, I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for some mentors in my life. So who would you say is some of your best mentors that helped you get to where you are today?
We don't have enough time to talk about that list. And I'll tell you why real quick. I was raised the only child of a single mom, and big backstory and on all that, but she had the wisdom to surround me as a young boy with mentors. And she would go out in the community and recruit people specifically to take me under their wing and do different things. And so the list started way back then. I mean, I started with really the first significant one I can remember was my scoutmaster. I was a Boy Scout, and my scoutmaster, Jack Whitaker, was just a prince of a man. And again, I didn't know it at the time. I couldn't really appreciate it until I got a lot older and looked back on. But, the way he would talk to me and the way he would show me things and explain things and challenge me to think about things the right way. And it started there. I was very comfortable with doing my own outreach to mentors after I got of age. And I mean, that started like in middle school, actually. There were some things that happened, and I identified a couple of teachers that I thought would be good help. And I just walked up to them after class one day and said, I have a thing I want to talk to somebody about. Would you be willing to be my guy? And they said, yes, I'd be happy to. And, it went on and on from there. So I am coming up on age 73, and I still have 3 guys I count as mentors, and we talk regularly, and we exchange ideas. And I'm also in a coaches circle here in the Houston area where I live. There are about 25 of us on the roster. We gather once a month, and we have our own mastermind that we work with, and it's all self-led and self-promoted, and been doing that now for, 6 or 8 years.
I love that. Yeah. To me, when people ask me that question, it's like, you never stop having mentors. There's not a point in your life where you go, I've hit it. I know everything. I don't need any more help. If you get there, you're probably doing it wrong. Right.
Well, and just one quick note to add, I'm doing what some call reverse mentoring. I'm actually reaching out to younger folks now too, and talking to me. I'm younger is a relative term, but for instance, I've just met a gentleman now. He's in his 40s, but he's a pretty proficient expert in the crypto space, and I'm just curious about that. I've never done crypto and didn't really understand it, but we're now building a relationship, and I'm having him show me all about crypto, just because it fills a need. I'm curious. I don't know it. I'd like to know it. I'd like to be able to talk intelligently about it, and not there yet, but I've found a resource now that I can rely upon to do it.
And that's great. And since 2009, we've been collecting books that our guests love to read. And it doesn't even have to be about the topic we talk about. It could be just a book that you read or are reading that you think this is amazing. Everyone should read this book. Do you have one or two that you want to suggest?
Again, those are many, but I guess I'll always point back to there is a book that kind of got me started on the more formal part of coaching and leadership development. And it's a book called Lincoln on Leadership. And it's a research that a gentleman did, and I need to do better at recalling his name. The book's been around for a long time, but it explores all of the letters of Abraham Lincoln, and this guy gleans out and picks out the nuggets of very profound leadership principle and practice that Lincoln demonstrated through all the turmoil and all the struggles, and talk about reacting, or responding, not reacting. He had plenty of opportunities to react, and in most of them, not all of them, but most of them, he chose to respond. So it's a fascinating book, and it lays out a lot of principles that are very, very valuable, I think.
That's great. No one's ever recommended that, so that will be a new one. But what my team started doing, which I love this idea, is we have an actual list on our website of all the books that have been recommended, and we link them back to the podcast where they were suggested. So this one will live in infamy, since you're the only one who's ever recommended that book. That's really great.
You. Yeah.
I can't thank you.
I can get you the author's name.
Yeah. Well, we'll look it up too, and we usually link it right to Amazon so people can go get it if they want to, and we'll get all that there. I can't thank you enough for coming on. This was a great conversation. I mean, I feel like I just got a master class in leadership by having you here to talk with me for a few minutes.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Chris. I really enjoyed our time on our episode, and you've really got something important going on there with your human engineering and your human hacking approach. I love that. It too is a very meaningful message that I think people ought to take advantage of.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I hope you all enjoyed the show, because I really did. And you can come back next month, and we'll be joined by mental health and wealth expert Shang Shaverda. And we'll see what we're going to learn next month. Until then, stay safe and go read something about leadership, and we'll see you next month.